Welcome to Tales of Hope, where every paw print counts. 𝗏𝗡𝗃 in the house, spreading love, hear the sound. Every week animal stories, rights and welfare in the mix. Step up, take action, we're giving animals a fix. Tales of Hope, raise your voice, make some noise. Change the game for every animal, girl and boy. One world, one fight, let's turn the page. A future for the voiceless, bring hope to center stage.
Very good morning, a good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers and listeners across the globe. Today, we have a very wonderful soul with us, Mr. Kenneth Shapiro, and you will find out everything about Mr. Shapiro during the course of our podcast with all the questions and the love that he has for the animal welfare. Kenneth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to indicate how much I appreciate the work that you're doing for animals and the connection you're making to spirituality and your effort, particularly on the ground, to work with stray animals or village animals, or so thank you to you.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Now, Dr. Shapiro, how does a child's empathy towards animals shape their understanding of compassion and justice in the larger humane world?
Okay, well, let me begin as a former professor with some definitions, okay?
All right.
So let's just distinguish three words, okay? So empathy is basically my being in your shoes and looking at the world from your point of view and feeling the world as you're feeling it, at least trying to do that, and it's somewhat successful, but not completely. Sympathy, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily involve empathy. It's just feeling bad for your situation. It's not imitating your situation or trying to capture your situation. So that's sympathy. Compassion, as we generally use it here, though people vary, compassion refers to actually not only just feeling what the person is going through or the animal is going through, but actually taking some action. So compassion also means trying to solve a problem too. So we make those distinctions. But getting back to empathy in childhood. So children are essentially born with a kind of empathy. It's like when they see the toast pop out of the oven.
The toaster. Yeah.
The toaster, thank you.
No, please, perfectly fine.
And it falls on the floor. They feel very, very bad for that toast. And they empathize with that toast in some very general way. In other words, they animate the inanimate. It's called animism. So everything, the leaf falling from the tree, everything has, a kind of feeling, if you will, and they can try to get some sense of it. Now, there's neurological evidence for this in what's called mirror neurons. So mirror neurons are when, for example, Ania, you stub your toe, and I see you stub your toe. There's some neurons in my brain that will mimic what you're experiencing. So it's a kind of primitive empathy that is inborn, okay? So children have that, and they have it for virtually every object in their environment, okay? So, but then what happens is that they are de-educated, if you will. So they learn from the culture, from their family, from their classmates, what are appropriate objects to empathize with and what are not. And the chicken on the plate, you don't need to empathize with the chicken on the plate. In fact, you're not supposed to. So they narrow down the scope of the universe of objects that are fitting objects of empathy. And it goes mostly to humans. So your question is, how does a child's empathy shape their understanding of compassion and justice in the larger human world? We shape it for them. We tell them that this animal you can sleep with in bed, and this animal you can love, and this animal is a pest, and this animal is not even, it's just property, etc. So we form their empathy so that So that the task then for the culture and for the family is to shape the children so that they include a broader scope of life that can be empathized with and therefore should be treated well.
Wow. That's an eye-opener for a lot of people. But I believe, I mean, as you said, it is our human biases, if I'm correct to say that, because what we perceive as biased is how we shape our children's futures. I think that's what, in a nutshell, would be. But I guess humans are made biased, to be honest, if I'm not mistaken.
They're what? I missed a word there.
I said humans are so biased about,
biased. Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
Now, moving forward, when societies normalize animal suffering, what shifts in cultural beliefs and values do we need to reawaken moral sensitivity towards all life?
Okay, well, that's a huge question. And it comes right at the beginning of our discussion, and I think we'll come back to it in various ways. But let me just, if I had to make one statement, I would say the shift that's needed is away from human exceptionalism and toward biocentricity, embracing all of life and not just humans. And there's a lot of powerful forces in the culture that push back against that. Many, many people, perhaps most people, have to live in a world in which they're struggling economically, and they don't have time for dealing with animal suffering. And in fact, many of them are dependent on animal suffering for their nourishment and clothing, etc. So it's the shift is something that's going to be long-term in coming, and we'll come back to that again. There's one other sort of dynamic that I think is very important psychologically. And by the way, my background is in psychology. So it's the whole notion of the other. So the other is part of what people turn to when they're dealing with deprivation. It's the popular term is scapegoating. So
Absolutely.
The reason we're struggling and the reason we have to work 10 hours a day and the reason for the whatever, it's because of those other guys. And those other guys very often include animals. So, there was a time when, nature was a tremendous threat, realistically, prehistory. But now animals are not that much of a threat, but we still, so for example, in the United States now, there's a struggle going on about whether or not to continue the effort to reintroduce wolves into the United States. And the wolf has this incredible history of being scapegoated, the horrible predator that, and Little Red Riding Hood, you're familiar with that in India, but
yes.
Anyways, okay. So that's a very important dynamic, and it's still currently used in politics that the leader identifies the bad guys and everybody puts their attention into doing something about the bad guys instead of dealing with the problems at hand.
You rightly said. I don't know if you're aware. Currently, we're facing the same situation in India at this point. The legal system has just got broken up. The Supreme Court on 7th of November, a bench of 2 judges has passed an order that all stray animals, especially the dogs, a lot of cattle and all that, they need to be picked up and from most of the government institutions like hospitals, schools, colleges, not only the government but even private schools and colleges, and they need to be sent to shelter. and they need to be sent to pounds. And the worst of all, the pounds and kennels are not even there. They don't even exist. So instead of addressing the issue rationally without giving people the chance to be heard, they've just passed a draconian order, and it needs to be implemented by I think by 13th of Jan 2026. That's what it is. And right now there's a lot of pushback that's been going on. People are on the streets talking and fighting for it.
So I mean, my limited sense of India, I have visited India one time, but my limited sense is that there's a very strong religious component that values animals. And so is that the resistance, or is that
No.
is all secularized?
To be honest, it's more of an hypocrisy that we talk about our sacred culture, that cow is sacred, and animals are sacred, which are related to our Indian gods and deities. But let's be honest, the ground reality today, just a couple of weeks back, we had, it was officially declared that India is the second largest exporter of beef, the meat. So, I mean, let's be honest, where exactly are we talking about, our sacred and culture and, looking or probably aligning the way of life with our, spirituality or the dharma that they call it. But this has all been, they have been going all against the tithe sort of thing.
Yes.
But
Yeah, I was familiar with that statistic, by the way. But my sense was, is this correct, that the animal that they're exporting is not the sacred cow? It's a different species. Is that true?
no, it's not. It basically includes everything. It includes the cows, it includes the buffaloes.
Okay,
And
buffalo, yeah.
yes, so it includes everything. So, I mean, it's a sad state. I know it's more of a hypocrisy. I would rather say that.
Okay.
All right.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you've written about the connection between animal abuse and human violence. Could you share how recognizing this link could transform both criminal justice and social welfare systems?
Okay, so let me just describe to you folks what the link is. It's a peculiar term that the research has been using. The link refers to the relationship between violence toward humans and abuse of animals, and that's a very strong correlation. It's not necessarily a causation, but I mean, it's not clear that if you abuse an animal, you then go on to abuse a human in violence, but they're associated. It could be the other way around. It could be the human first and then the animal. Yeah. So, but it's a very, very strong association, and it's well established, and it has very strong policy implications. And some of those, let me just mention a couple of those. So, for example, the courts now can allow a kind of representative, some of the courts, a representative for the animal in cases that involve animal, the custody of an animal, for example, might be an issue, or an animal that attacked a human might be an issue. So there's some kind of representation for the animal's point of view. You also can leave money in a trust if you die, and your animal will then be taken care of. So there's an attempt to value an animal beyond simply property. So that, for example, if I lose my dog in some way through somebody else's abuse of that animal, and I go to court, I don't just get the $30 value of the market value of the dog or the replacement of the dog. I now can get an emotional payback as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So, there's just a lot of stuff going on that sort of elevates the status of animals. Backing this up is that studies show that if you have a dog or a cat in your family and someone comes along and wants to do their study and says, how many members are there in your family? 80% of the people include in that number the cat and the dog. So they're members of a family. They're beyond property. They're sentient beings. So how can it transform both criminal justice and social welfare? Well, it's transforming criminal justice in that animals are now having some standing, not in the legal sense of standing, but they have some recognition in the court, and their issues and their value and so forth is now coming into being. And there's an attempt to push back against what in the West has always been the case in terms of the status of an animal in justice, which is they're simply property. And so people like Steve Wise, who just passed away recently, he spent his life trying to make the case that animals are persons under the law.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
And he made some progress, but not much. But there's also sort of solutions that don't quite make them into persons, but have a separate category for sentient being rather than, distinguish between pianos and dogs. So it's a very important movement. Animal law is now a major part of almost every law school in the United States. And I don't know about what the story is in India. Maybe you could tell me, but there is now there's now a subfield of animal law, and there's people who are sympathetic toward animals and now have the opportunity to bring that into their work and advocate through the law, through changes in law for animals.
On this, I'll just like to add one thing, where you said, people can leave a trust for their dogs. And in India, we have a very good example of Sir Ratan Tata, who just passed away recently, not too long ago. He has left a good amount of fund for his pet family member dog to be well taken care of even after he's gone. He's assigned a proper caretaker who's going to take care of this dog, and apart from that, he's left enough for his entire lifetime to survive. That's a very good example what people should look at, in terms of when it comes to dogs or animals, that they are a part of the family. And I think Sir Ratan Tata was a very classic example, somebody who lived by what he said.
Tell me a little bit about him.
Wow. Sir Ratan Tata is India's topmost industrialist. They run one of the biggest conglomerates in the country. But in terms, when it came to especially dogs or animals, the kind of love that he had is amazing. They have these hotels, 5-star hotels, the Taj group of hotels, where dogs, the stray dogs are treated with respect. They can come in and out, and they have proper space, sort of thing. Even the entire building that they have of their office, the community dogs sort of are well taken care of. They are not hushed or pushed away. They are all treated with a lot of love and care. To be honest, in India, if we can point out to some, there are a very handful of people that you can look up to and say, yes, this guy was, this was a person that he's left a legacy behind when it comes to between the human and the animal relation. He redefined it, to be honest. Yeah,
so individuals, particularly prominent individuals, can have a great influence. But the criminal justice changes that I was talking about before, they also trickle down to the general social view of things.
Right.
So just one other I wanted to mention is that when a person is being victimized in a domestic setting, usually a woman, but not always, oftentimes they have not left that setting because they were concerned about the well-being of their animal. So one of the policy implications of that is that we have now established safe havens,
Right.
so that the women's shelter might be adjoined with or in itself participate in a facility for taking care of the dog or the cat, so that the woman will not feel obliged to stay in the perpetrating setting. So that to me again is just that people becoming aware of that again just sort of begins to make the kind of cultural change in beliefs and attitudes that we're going to be talking about more later.
Absolutely. Now, moving forward, you helped pioneer human-animal studies long before it was recognized as an academic field. What cultural or historical gaps were you hoping to address when you began this journey?
Yes, so let me begin in sort of a narrow frame. The narrow frame within the academy at that time, this was back in late 70s.
Wow.
There was the traditional social science disciplines, sociology, anthropology, psychology, were very, very human-centered. And there were also, and philosophy didn't deal with animals except as a way of saying how we're different than them and therefore we should have such and such respect, but they shouldn't, as a kind of negative example or something. So on the other side, there were fields that were doing studies of animals, but one of the primary strategies of those disciplines was to use animals as models of human behavior, human pathology. So we have the animal models approach to all different kinds of pathology and stuff. So this again, to me, suggested the need for a field that would be focused on human-animal relationships. And that kind of field did not exist. So that was the immediate cause. But I mean, there were other indicators to me that why this field might, and I'm not the only one who thought of this field, but and that was that there was in the late 70s and early 80s the emergence in the UK and the United States of a social justice movement called the Animal Protection Movement, or the Animal Rights Movement, or the Animal Liberation Movement, and that there was clearly a need for increasing the credibility of that social justice movement by informing people about what animals are really like, what human-animal relations are or could be. So there was a lot acting to suggest the need for this field.
Wow. Honestly, I think we need that sort of moment right now in our country. We seriously need that at this point in time.
Yeah, there's one other thing I would add that people might not be aware of. I think historically, there was a time when in traditional ways we were better to the animals. The animals were much closer to us. Even on the farm, the animals sort of lived with us much more directly. And then after World War II, the intensive confinement of animals for food production came in. And that was a tremendous increase in the number of animals who were exploited and suffering. So the recognition of that was also part of what gave rise to the animal protection movement, which then gave rise to the need for a field to support that.
Absolutely. Now, looking back, how has HAS evolved from a niche academic pursuit into a vital interdisciplinary conversation shaping ethics, policy, and consciousness?
Well, that's an assertion that is very, very generous. It has certainly emerged way beyond my low expectations back in the 80s about what happened with this field. I mean, and I personally like to keep my expectations low because I can't deal with the disappointment. But this was a tremendous boon in terms of realizing a much higher expectation. The field really, really took off. And one of the indices of its taking off was that the number of fields that interface, the number of traditional disciplines that interface with human animal studies has been increasing. And it's now like 28 or 30. And I would challenge you to mention a discipline that doesn't have an interface. So we talk about anthropology. Anthropology used to treat animals as sort of a cultural artifact instead of treating animals as shapers of the culture. I mean, if you look at the cow in India, how did that shape the culture? I mean, and how did it influence the nature of your cities?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in the American West, the introduction of the horse, huge influence on not only the new settlers, but also on the First Nation people. They adopted the horse and so forth. So expectations greatly fulfilled. So I saw, more personally, I began my career in animal interests working on the issue of animal research, anti-vivisection, the use of animals as models for human pathology and so forth. And that was particularly a problem in psychology. And I worked on that for some time, and it was very, very difficult going. So at some point, I partly selfishly realized that I was burning out. We'll talk about that later. And I shifted to the focus on the development of this academic field. And instead of my positions, particularly in psychology, closing doors, it started opening doors. People in psychology and then all these other interfacing fields who were animal lovers were so eager to make their major study include animals. So they just jumped in. So people, instead of criticizing me, were knocking on my door. Please publish my paper, da 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 da. So that was, yeah. The other thing is that in some ways, the field represented for me a kind of biting of the apple. What I mean by that is that people recognized that there was something lacking, that the human-centeredness, and this is the scholars mostly, but also certainly the advocates, that there was, that we needed to shift our focus from exclusive work on helping humans to also helping animals. And then the recognition that there was a link between those two things, so that when we were helping animals, we were also helping humans. That was a tremendous boon. So the link was a tremendous asset in promoting this field.
And I think if you look at it spiritually, even, it wouldn't be wrong to say it's probably one of your callings. It could have been one of your callings, that this is what you're meant to do as well. Or even for a lot of other humans, it is a way of life aligning with our spiritual needs as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. There's this quote, which I can't quite remember, but I'll paraphrase it. Anatole France said something like, if you haven't realized your love for an animal, you're missing an important part of your soul, something like that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I know. I've read that quite often that
Okay.
it's a part of your soul that's missing. But I think even on spiritual aspect, if you look at it in terms of spiritual, when it comes to spirituality, most of your leaders, spiritual saints, if you read from the scriptures and all these holy books that are there, they do put a lot of value to animals. Not only to the animals, it's just that I don't know if it would be right to say that, but if you look at all these scriptures, they've been written by humans way long after these saints and these prophets left the human form or the vessel sort of thing. And most of it, if you will look at it, it's been I would say interpreted to benefit just a few of these handful people, not to the entire community or a human race. So that's the reason I sometimes, because we don't have the actual truth with us. And I believe from the spirituality path that I follow, or the living master that I have, it's a very simple fundamental out there. If you want to look or search, everything is within you, and apart from that, every being on this planet has value and is there for a purpose, not for us to exploit them, whether it is the environment or the animals, or whether it is our fellow human beings. We all have to respect everything that the God has created for us.
Okay, well, I'll come back on that now or later.
Absolutely.
So let's just look at the Western tradition of monotheism first, and then you can fill in on the Eastern tradition of tradition, period. I won't call it monotheism because it's much more subtle than that. But in the Western tradition, in the Old Testament, the animals were created on the fifth day.
Right.
And the treasured creation was of the humans, and that was a separate creation. And they were given dominion over all the animals. Okay? And the people, they were created in the image of God.
Yes.
And the animals were not. So there's that tradition, and then in the Christian, it's somewhat similar. It seems to me, it's primarily about love that extends to human beings. So. I think that religious tradition, supplemented by the philosophical tradition, which we can talk about at some point, are part of what helped develop this human superiority view that is, I think, the basis of the foundation of the possibility of exploiting animals for human resources. So now tell me about the Eastern tradition.
Now, you see, in Eastern tradition, to be honest, if you look at any Indian deity, or because we have so many deities in this country, or not only in this country, but as far as the Eastern culture is concerned, especially with the Hinduism, if you look at most of these Indian deities, they all have animals as their companions. If you look at Lord Krishna, he had cow. If you look at Ma Durga, she is on a lion, on a tiger, sort of. She's on a tiger. You look at today we have that. It's one of those holy days when you look at a form of Lord Shiva, which is a 𝗘𝗏𝗃, and he had dog by his side. You look at, there are so many stories or mythological, whatever you want to call them. There was Lord Indra who had a dog called Sarama. Now, as per the culture, they were integrated into lives to be with us, to be respected, to care for. But let's be honest, as over the years of what I have experienced, or probably this is my personal opinion, we humans have exploited animals. We've abused them, and what you call procentrism, where we think everything, we have dominion over all of them. But in reality, if you look it from a very divergent perspective, where if you were to really see that the Indian gods had them as companions, treating them well, but over the years we have forgotten that these are sacred beings and they need to be taken care of rather than being exploited. So I guess instead of saying humans have evolved, this is my personal opinion. Again, I take it as, I think we have regressed, to be honest, rather than, evolving as humans. And, yes, I would agree with you on one of the points where you say God created humans in his own form. It's not only the humans. I think even the nature that we have, the animals that we have, there is God in everywhere. Because if you look at it from a simple perspective, it's his creation. And how can he be wrong? Or how can he tell you to exploit another one? I don't think any culture or any holy scripture would say that, you can exploit or you can kill. Or, sorry to say this, but there are certain cultures where not only in Hinduism even, they have this where they have to sacrifice an animal just to please the god. Yes. I don't think any god would be pleased by a sacrifice like that.
Well, but that was also part of the Western tradition. You would in the classical temple days of the Jewish religion.
Yes,
you'd sacrifice animals, to appease God. So apparently they felt God wanted that.
Anyway, this can go on and on.
Yes. I just want one point in your examples. I was glad to see that some of the gods, it's not just dogs and cats, it's also tigers.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even if you look at, if it comes to things like that, we have a human god. We have a god called Ganesha, Lord Ganesha, who has the upper part of his body is of an elephant.
Right.
So it's just not restricted to one animal. But it is there in the scriptures and the book. If you look at it, it's most of the animals are there. If you look at any of the animals, even if you look at Lord Vishnu, he has snake, the water snake around. It's there. You look at even another form of Shiva, he has a snake around his neck. So it's just not one. They have, there is another, I forgot the name of the god, but there is another fish which is called 𝗏𝗏𝗄. So it's not just restricted to one animal. It's like there's a whole gamut of animals around.
Okay, good. So we'll come back to this.
Definitely we'll do that. Now,
okay.
As the Animal and Society Institute, HAS report transitions to University of Illinois, What enduring value or vision would you like to see carried forward into its next chapter?
So the HAS, Human Animal Studies Report, is a simple resource that we developed that involves a monthly newsletter which describes grant options, new research, all kinds of opportunities and networking opportunities for people interested in human animal studies. It's a very important resource. We're very happy that University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana has taken it on. In terms of my what I hope to be the next chapter, it's a more mundane thing than enduring values and vision, but I guess it leads to those. What's been missing to some extent in the development of the field is institutional growth. So let me distinguish. On the one hand, there's academic opportunity in the sense of publication venues. We now have over a dozen journals that you can publish in. We have all kinds of conventions and symposia and podcasts and so forth and so on, so that the academic field is well networked and well established. But what we don't have fully is institutional presence. And part of the reason for that is that the institutions are traditionally discipline-based and budgeted disciplinary. So, the psychology department gets a certain amount of money and the anthropology department doesn't. There is no animal discipline per se. So the interdisciplinarity of HAS is in some ways hurts us. So we're beginning to see the development of institutional presence, and that is in the form of a minor. I don't know if that's a term that you folks use, but it's not quite a major in a field, but it's a minor or a concentration in a certain area, a certain subject matter. There could be a major. There could be a degree in animal studies. There could be a master's. There could be a PhD. So there could be a faculty seat that's devoted to a person who's doing human animal studies. All of these things are beginning to occur, but have a long way to go. And as I say, the economics of and the politics of the academy mitigate against those. Militate against those might be a better word. So that's what I'm hoping to see, that there'll be further institutional growth, that this will then percolate down as students are exposed to this stuff, to the shifts in values and vision that we hope will occur as we slowly move from an anthropocentric view of the world to a biocentric view of the world.
I would say amen. Let's keep our fingers crossed for that.
Yes.
Now, after decades of advocacy, why do you believe legislation alone cannot end cruelty? What deeper transformation in cultural values must accompany policy reform?
Yes. Another very big question. What's the nature of cultural attitude change? Huge. But anyway, so my personal view and strategy or tactic has been to be open to all forms of critique and advocacy. So from the on-the-street protest to the beginnings of corporate entities devoted to these issues, to the legislation, some of which we talked about, that contributes to the human animal studies field that contributes to the court systems where things begin to occur. So I believe we need to push on all of these fronts. And in some ways, the more aggressive, assaultive kinds of stuff, not quite violent, but the throwing blood on the fur coat kind of stuff, in some ways that has provided an entree for the more conservative establishmentarian approaches, because it says, well, we're not associated with that. We do this, so it's sort of a side effect that we look good compared to that. So I believe that it's not just legislation alone. And I believe, as your statement implies, your question implies, that at bottom, it's a change in values and beliefs. And we'll come back to this again, but the role of religion/spirituality in that is something that is a very important question to deal with. And I'm probably not as confident as you about that, but we'll get to that.
Absolutely. Now,